Hey family, this is Quiet Storm Speaks, and I'm coming to you with another video, just sharing my journey, the transparency of my journey. My last video was talking about, grieving the past chapter of my life and walking into a new chapter. And as I share this journey very transparently, the last title of the video of the title of my last video was "Gifts Come in Packages We Wouldn't Ordinarily Want to Open." And so now I'm going to talk about the gift. So I've had a few weeks since that video was published, and I had to go through a grieving process, which is normal anytime you lose something that you've had or hadn't made up a big part of your life previously, and that was necessary. But after that grieving process or through that grieving process, it dawned on me. So, what do you want? And I started thinking, I want to be fulfilled. I don't want to work for just money or survival anymore. We all have to make a living, right? But um, I wanted to, my desire was to work for purpose. And so as I started taking some classes, business classes, real estate has always been a passion of mine. I started running towards the real estate. Oh, yeah, I can do the real estate. I know it. I've got 20 plus years of experience. I can do this. But then I started going to the business classes the next weekend and realized, well, I've got the businesses and they're built out, but I don't have the real airtight business structure. So I knew I needed more information and knowledge in that area. Third weekend, I go to another class, and although it wasn't a class that ended up being for me, with just what they were offering, what I did get from that class was they made us do this exercise at the beginning of the class, and we had to, on a sticky note, write down our purpose. Write down the things that we love, the things that we don't want to do without, and the things that bring us joy. And on all of my lists, mostly, um, all I could talk about was my purpose. Um, my purpose is my whole life I've been an inspirational person. So I coined myself as an inspirationalist, a new word that I've made up. Yes, that's mine. And I mentor, I motivate people. I, put positive, inspirational messages out there. I've done this for years. But most recently, before I started to step away from my corporate job, I had really started to struggle with remaining hidden, knowing that my purpose was to come out of the darkness into the light and share my journey. And so, a lot of people don't know, especially on this YouTube channel, that I am an angel mom. And what that means is I am a mom who's had a child who passed away. Coming up on the 10-year anniversary, which is April 4th, since my daughter passed away. And just to give you a high level overview of our journey, my daughter, Brittany, at the age of 16, was diagnosed with a 16-inch tumor on her spine. She was a starting guard of her high school basketball team, started coming down with some back pain, never one to be sick or complain of pain. When she started to complain, I knew that it was serious. So I started taking her to our family physician, and, he came up with different theories. Maybe she has asthma. He gave her an inhaler. That never really sat well with me because we don't have asthma in our family. But we're like, okay, we'll just see. 2 weeks later, her pain is getting worse. We take her back, and he says, oh, okay, well, have you had any injuries playing basketball? And she said, well, yeah, I did fall this one time, and this heavier girl fell on top of me. He says, okay, you could have cracked ribs. In hindsight, why didn't I make him do an Xray then? Because if you got cracked ribs, can we verify that? I know there's nothing they can do. She can't be in a body cast or anything. You just kind of heal, and you can take pain medication until the ribs heal, right? But I should have, made him, or at least said, hey, let's do an X-ray and verify that. I know better now. But long story short, he kept giving her pain medication, and then she got to a point where she was chewing, Tylenol with codeine, like sweet tarts. It was doing nothing for her pain. We did this process for a year and a half, and then finally, I take her back, and he says, "Let's do an X-ray." We did the X-ray, and before I could get home from the X-ray facility, they were calling me. You need to rush your daughter to the hospital right now. She's got this 16-inch tumor on her spine. So there's another time where I'll share that complete journey, but the tumor ended up being, it was malignant, it was cancer. And we had a 5.5 year journey with her going through this battle, fighting cancer. It was beautiful. It was hard. It was incredibly difficult. We had very high highs, extremely low lows. We grieved. We had to do things in that process that I would never have thought I would have to do as a mom. Um, Towards the end of her journey, we had to sit down together and write down and fill out this form called the 5 wishes. And I had to have my 22-year-old daughter write out what her 5 wishes were as she was going to be transitioning into going to heaven. And that was very difficult. So, long story short, again, my daughter eventually passed. Like I said, April 4th, it was 2012. And I went through, like, the first week or so, I was on an incredible high because I understood that God's hand was at play. No, He doesn't bring illness, but I understand He can use anything. And I kept saying, I'm now in a community of many angel moms. I had joined these Facebook groups looking for support, looking for words that I didn't have, within me to say how I was feeling, to describe how I was feeling. Um, but then I hit rock bottom. I stopped looking for hope. Um, Initially, like I said, the first couple of weeks, I was on a high, and I kept saying, no, no, God would never ask me to suffer this greatly without there being a greater purpose on the end of this. But again, I got to a point to where I wanted to be sad, and I stopped looking towards hope, and I fell hard into a very deep depression. And it took me a good 2.5 years just about to go through that depression and crawl out. I finally, throughout that time, I was going to some grief counseling, but if anybody's had to go through the navigating for therapy, a good therapist, that's a hard system to navigate. So my first therapist, I ended up knowing more about her and her lifestyle than she knew about mine. And that was an indication to me that I really wasn't getting anything from the session. So I stopped going to her and, was still at rock bottom, depressed, super depressed, and going through my grief cycle. I finally got to a point to where I was so just lost and broken. I knew I needed to get some help. I still had kids to live for and to parent. So I found another grief counselor, and we began this, we embarked on this 8.5, 9 year journey of healing. And I had to do some very deep, dark work. And what I realized was that my grief wasn't all about losing my daughter, but it was about everything that had happened to me up until that point that I hadn't fully grieved. The world is not set up for people to grieve, not the time that it takes for us to fully grieve and go through the entire grief cycle. every single trauma that happened to me from childhood through adulthood, through this point of now my daughter passing away, I had to take a few days, maybe, and then go back to work and go back to life like that never happened. We were always just conditioned and pushed to, or maybe, just you just got to get back and do back, do what you were doing before. There's no time for grief. There's no time for, and nobody talked about seeing a therapist to work through childhood traumas or anything. So all of this, one thing I've learned in this journey, and I may have said it in the previous video, when you begin your healing journey, everything within you that requires healing rushes to the surface at once. And it's overwhelming, and you have to have a good therapist with you to help you prioritize what's most important. So, long story short, once again, I went through that entire grief cycle. I did all of the healing work, the good, the bad, the ugly, and I got it cleaned up. And I finally got to a place of peace and understanding, acceptance, which is the final stage of grief, acceptance. And then now there's a new, actually, industry terms is the final stage of grief is acceptance. But there's a writer out there, and I don't remember his name. I'll have to look it up and link it down in the description. But he wrote a book, and it's called The Sixth Stage of Grief. And that is finding meaning and purpose. So I get to a point where I found purpose. I love serving. I have a nonprofit foundation. We travel, we do mission trips, we do random acts of kindness. I support other parents who are going through that same journey with their children who have childhood cancer. And so that really helped me find meaning and purpose and know that I could now be someone who I wish I had when I was going through that journey. But I was still battling with this feeling of wanting to remain hidden. Um, Now, since going through a spiritual awakening, I realized that that was actually spiritual warfare that was on me, trying to prevent me from walking in my purpose. So I go through this painful experience with my job where I had to separate instantly. And I had known, again, my purpose is keeping me up at night. I knew I couldn't run away from it anymore. I pray, I hear from God, and He's like, I need you to show where you are with this healing. Because how does anybody know what's possible with your level of healing? How does anybody know what I've done? How does God get the glory for taking me out of that pit? He climbed in that pit with me and helped me get out of it. And not only helped me get out of it, but transformed my life, right? And so I finally, after separating from my job, again, going through that grief process and then deciding it's just time to walk in my purpose. So again, I've got a new therapist. I'm in a new state, and she's helping me walk through some of the parts that were missed with my original counselor. But she's a woman of color, so she understands me on a different level. And I knew that that was critical and it's helpful. So as we're walking through and I'm telling her about being hidden, she's challenging me and she's pushing me like, you must step into the light and share your story. So at the end of every session, she asked me, what is my new affirmation and what is my declaration for the week? And I finally got to a point to where I said, I declare that I'm going to do something that allows me to walk into my purpose. And my affirmation is, I affirm that as I begin to share what has happened for me as far as getting to a place of healing, acceptance, and finding purpose, that I can help even one mom who is suffering the loss of her child. So I was doing some digging and I found this life group online, and I joined. The facilitator met with me a few days later and said, "Hey, I just want to get to know you and find out, what your story is and, what your expectations are with joining the group." So I was very honest. I told her, an angel mom. I'm 10 years out just about now. I've gotten to a place of healing, acceptance, and purpose, finding purpose in it. And I said, I want to be in a community of other women who have lost their children, who I can speak to. I can learn from them because everyone has a different perspective, they have a different story. But I think I have something to offer as well. And I want to share my voice and my story. And eventually, I want to launch into my own life group. And so I would like to get in and see how you facilitate it and, see what I can learn to help support, my ventures of doing the same somewhere down the road. So, long story short, I joined the first meeting the day later after meeting with the facilitator. And these women are, they're raw. Their children have just been killed or gone through. They've just lost it. One lady, her son had just been murdered March 1st, and this was like the 20th. We're on this call March 20th. So when I say the wounds are raw, they're raw. And I got a chance to share my story, and I just felt like this is what I need to do. Your purpose when you're walking in it, everything, like, I didn't know what I was going to say. I didn't prepare anything. I just told my story, but I feel like I was just really being used by a higher power to say what it is that needed to be said about my story and my healing. So the facilitator towards the end of the meeting asked each of the ladies, what were they going to take from this call? And the one lady said, what I'm taking from this call is Tammy is my goal. She's where I want to be. I'm 6 months out, just about, from losing my child. And with her being 10 years out, I want to get to where she is. And I was so honored. But even sharing it now, it makes me a little emotional because it broke me down. And I thanked her and I told her I honored her for saying that. And I shared with them how much of a battle it was for me to step into the light and share my story and show what healing looks like and show those women and other women like them, like all of us, that is possible. Healing is possible. And I said, the only thing that I regret right now, tears streaming down my face, is that I didn't do this sooner. And I realized in that moment that the years that I kept hidden and hadn't shared my story, that I was harming someone else because I wasn't sharing with them what was possible. And there are people that suffered. So the greatest lesson that I took away from that, not just for me, but for anyone, we all have a purpose. And you may have heard this. I've heard this before many times. Share your story because you don't know whose life you're impacting by sharing it. And the world needs your purpose. The world needs your story because when you open up and share your story, again, that impacts someone else's life who may need it. They could be at the end of their rope, and you may be that little bit of hope that says, wow, that's possible for me too. And it helps them climb out of the pit or whatever it is that they found themselves in that brought them to rock bottom. So this message is an awakening for myself, but it is also an encouragement for you to share your story. It gives other people permission to heal. And so that's my message for today. If you're battling with, like I was, being hidden, or just you feel like there's something that's hampering your voice, push through it. Pray if you pray. Meditate if you meditate. Whatever it is that you call on that's a higher power than you, tap into it and push through it and do what you've been called to do. So that's my message for you today. This is a message of hope, love, and healing. Again, my name is Quiet Storm Speaks. And as you know, I always say, let's get this healing, family. And I'll leave you with the highest level of peace, and that is shalom.